Hello viewer, welcome to today's show. I'm your host Brenda Ogweno. Today's topic, we're going to discuss about sexual harassment in higher learning institutions or campuses. But before we do that, I have amazing guests in the building. Let them introduce themselves first. Karibuni sana. We'll start from here.
Hi, my name is Lucinora. I'm a student in one of the universities in Kenya. I'm also an ambassador for Campus Me Too campaign.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you.
And you?
My name is Beryl Bakita. I'm also a student leader in one of the universities in Kenya and also a Campus Me Too ambassador.
Okay, thank you so much. Why is it that we are tackling the issue right now?
Okay, one of the reasons we're tackling the issue is because it has been there and we want to break that silence by fighting this injustice of ending sexual harassment in institutions of higher learning.
Okay, and what's your take, Lucy?
My take is, like she said, it's a vice that's been going on for ages. We've known about it, we've talked about it, but nothing has been done about it. And since we're here now, we're acting.
Okay, thank you so much. Is it that the slay queen, like they call themselves, they usually take to one, like wanajipeleka kwa professor? Is it okay? Is it true?
Okay, what I can say is that that's why our Campus Me Too campaign is specifically on harassment. That means before it becomes an harassment, it's under consent, under no consent. Like someone has to consent or not to consent. That's why we are doing the campaign.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, a recent survey shows that 1 in 2 female and also 1 in 4 that are being harassed in higher institution by a staff or a member. Is it okay that also boys get harassed in campuses?
Well,
is it true?
Yes, it's true. We also did the survey, and that's what it showed, that men also get sexually harassed. We've had testimonials of men coming out and talking that they've also been harassed. So it's not just a women's issue, it's also a men's issue. It's true that women are more likely to get harassed statistically, but it's also true that men are getting harassed.
Yeah, and the worst part is that men don't speak out.
Yeah.
And this can lead to things like suicide, depression, which is not really quite well.
Okay, what are the scenarios that you have found during this in your movement that you can just tell us or be able to show us the scenario of the boy get molested in campuses?
Okay, I'll give an example of one of the testimonies I got. There's this student who's doing film and theater in a particular university in Kenya. This student was a class representative, and the way he's like views that a lecturer is supposed to kind of give a moral guidance. So whenever the lecturer came closer, he thought that this lecturer is kind of maybe want to give moral guidance. And in reality, this lecturer was after something else. So that's when this particular gentleman got fond of this lecturer, not knowing that it will lead to harassment. And it reached a point that it was so severe that even this lecturer will ask for death. And you can't really turn back around that, because you might end up even having missing mark and even failing in that particular unit. Yeah.
What about if you don't have the evidence? How do you deal with that situation?
Okay, and that's why we encourage people to get evidence, because whenever you storm into an office, you never know that you're gonna be harassed. Yeah. So you can never tell, but at times, some that happens usually have evidence. For example, like messages, sending news. Maybe the verbal and non-verbal can have an issue, but there are some that like using social media or media platform that can leave behind evidences.
And also to talk about evidence, we've come up with a student toolkit, and there's a guideline on how you can get evidence that this is happening. So the main thing is, are you safe when collecting this evidence? So if you're safe, then there's a guideline on how you can collect evidence and then take the case forward, because without evidence then there's no case.
Okay, have you had any successful story about that?
Yeah, we have quite a number, but the funny thing is that we have the constitution whereby the Sexual Harassment Act of 2006 that talks about sexual harassment, but it only covers a minor. What about someone who's above 18? They only cover this kind of individual when it comes to rape. And that's why we are even engaging the Ministry of Education to implement this law that has been there since 2006 and has never been implemented.
Normally they say when a woman say no, it means yes. What's your take on that?
Well, let's answer from my point of view. I'm a woman. When I say no, I mean no. So if someone says no, then respect that no. There's no this notion of someone is playing hard to get, or there's that's very common. People think that. But if someone said no, then respect that no. If they meant maybe, they'll tell you, you know what, it's a maybe. Maybe I'll come, maybe I won't. If it's a yes, then it's a direct yes. You know, there's nothing like no means yes. It's not there anymore.
Okay, how do you deal with the stigma after you have come out and you have shared your experience?
Okay, I know stigma is one of the hard things to deal with, but we have departments like peer counselor. Apart from that, we also encourage people to have mentors. We just don't encourage someone to speak out. And you know, when people speak out, is kind of a way of breaking that cocoon, that silence that has been dying within you. So it's like you're releasing something that was kind of overwhelming or looks like a burden.
Tell us more about Campus Me Too.
Well, Campus Me Too is a campaign. It's a Pan-African movement. It's a campaign by students to deal with sexual harassment in institutions of higher learning. It was started last year. It was launched at the University of Nairobi, and we've been doing this campaign since last year. We aim to end sexual harassment. That's our end game. And we realize that most of the some universities have policies on sexual harassment, but then they're just policies on paper. They're not implemented. Some campuses don't even have policies in the first place. So if there are cases of sexual harassment, then how do students go about it? When we realized there's a gap in the most student leaders from various campuses came together and they started this campaign, and more ambassadors are joining as we continue. So yeah.
Okay, don't you think that the dress code affects or also provoke the sexual harassment in campuses?
Okay, we can't really talk about that, because one thing we say that there's that hierarchy of childhood to adulthood. So someone who's superior than you is supposed to like act like a guidance. It doesn't show that the way I express myself, this person should take advantage of whatever is there. This is a person with power, a person who's intelligent, a person who has the ability to give you a moral guidance and tell you that whatever you're doing is not right and show you a good direction. Because at the end of it all, these are our mentors.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also to add on that, we've been having conversations about rape culture. And this is one of the things that, when someone comes and they say they've been raped, the first question is, what were you wearing? Which is victimization in itself. It's stigmatization. And if that's the approach that you're going to be having, I think we've already had the conversation on my dress, my choice. And there's no excuse. There's no excuse of someone being sexually harassed. There's no justification. It's not about your dress code. It's just about the perpetrator, and that's what you're trying to say here.
Okay, and also, do students usually get harassed by lecturers, or they can get harassed with the staff?
Okay, our campaign mostly focus on student to staff, but we, according to statistics, we also realize that a bigger percentage of the perpetrators are lecturers, because these are people you directly kind of interact with. Yeah, like 60%, because you imagine the cook, if you don't go to eat, if you cook at your place, how will you meet a cook? Maybe security guys. At times, maybe you just enter school, you don't have issues with them, you don't interact. So our immediate interaction is our lecturers. And that's why we focus on staff, but a bigger percentage is the lecturers.
Okay, what sort of cases lead to sexual harassment?
Well, there are many cases, especially right now. Most of the testimonials we've received are about missing marks. So if you have missing marks, then you have to interact with your lecturer. You have to get the way forward. And the way forward is your lecturer to tell you, like, for example, your missing cut is because you had a cut missing mark or an exam missing mark. So you have to interact directly with the lecturer, and they hold the power of giving you the mark or not, So it ends up being, if the lecturer wants to have a sexual relation with you, they'll use that against you. Do this, and then you don't even have to do the paper. I'll just give you the marks.
And that draws us to one of our 5 demands, whereby we also want to have like a committee outside the lecturers. Like we don't want to interact with the lecturer. We have to have a committee that is not directly related to the lecturers, that will handle issues like missing mark. so that we avoid that interaction that it's a lecturer to determine if you're going to graduate school, if you're going to pass that unit, you're going to do that unit. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think lecturers do this intentionally?
Well, one of the demands we have is that the lecturers should be trained on issues concerning sexual harassment, so that there's no space for ignorance. You're doing this because you didn't know it was wrong. I think at this level, every person should be aware of that. So most lecturers who are perpetrators are aware of what they're doing. That's why we're calling them perpetrators.
Yeah.
They do it intentionally. And they know, for instance, if the lecturer is aware that they're supposed to help you through your missing mark, but then they decide to take this opportunity and ask something in return, it's their responsibility. Yet they want something in return for doing their responsibility. So if you're asking if they're doing it knowingly, I would say yes, they're doing it knowingly.
Yeah, and apart from that, they even in that demand, we also encourage them to sign the code of conduct. If someone has signed that against sexual harassment, this person goes ahead and omit the same mistake. So you see, this is someone who knows it and ignores it, and ignorance is an offense on its own.
Okay. Yeah. So who do you recruit as a campus Me Too in your movement?
Anyone who's willing to take part in this campaign, join us in the movement to act and organize and mobilize as many people as possible. You don't have to be a victim. You can be an advocate, an activist that who want to see us through this journey of achieving maybe gender equality and creating a school as safe space for learning, which is no longer a safe space for learning because of issues like sexual harassment.
Does the school inform students of their rights?
Well, we're still talking about our demands. One of the demands is that students be facilitated on materials on sexual harassment. When we're doing this survey, we realized that most people are not even aware of what constitutes sexual harassment. So if universities and campuses are not teaching the students this is what constitutes sexual harassment and this is why you report, then students are unaware. And the funny thing is, it's not funny, but the thing is, we realized that like 38% of female students and 33% of male students felt like they wouldn't report a case of sexual harassment because they don't think the university is going to take it seriously, which is a serious allegation to begin with. So if they don't feel, they're not aware that there are policies in place, and sometimes the policies are not in place, and sometimes you hear cases that have been reported, but nothing happened about it. So you realize that most students are not aware because maybe the university is doing nothing about it. Yeah.
What are the services available for sexual harassment survivor?
We have toolkits, she said, we have toolkits to give guidance. Apart from that, one of our demands of educating newly enrolled students, it also gives them knowledge, because at times I wink at you, you don't want me to wink at you. That's harassment. I didn't want you to wink at me and you did that. So sometimes you get harassed, but by creating awareness, by educating people on the forms of sexual harassment, gives us the knowledge to know that, I have been suffering from sexual harassment without my aware, because many people just view sexual harassment with their sexuality, which is a really, really wrong thing. And that's why when the campaign started, we did create awareness. Apart from that, we also made even to collect signatures, like 11,000, which we even gave that to the Ministry of Education last year in December. Yeah.
Okay, is your movement in Nairobi campus or it covers all around in the country?
Well, the signatures were collected from students like all over the country, campus students.
So it's
a movement that covers all the universities. Yes.
Yeah, and institutions of higher learning.
So Campus Me Too is in KU, Nairobi, and also private universities?
Yeah. No school is excluded.
Yeah.
We all bring all universities, and that's why we are saying any sexual harassment institution of higher learning. That means the colleges, the tertiary institution, the universities, all those.
Okay, can you call Campus Me Too a club in an institution?
Okay. It can be a club depending on how those leaders in that particular institution decide to bring it on board. But as we are a movement, and some might maybe want it to become a club, it's how those leaders representing or ambassadors from that institution decide to put it under which category. Maybe if you put it as a club in a certain university, it will have ambassadors. To some, if you say a movement, they love movements. So it all depends with an institution.
Whom do you think should receive training about sexual harassment, the student or the lecturers?
All of them. All of them. Ignorance is no defense. And as much as we are looking at the perpetrators, victims, all those, everyone should be trained, because knowledge is gold, and any knowledge received, it might help me, help my sister, my brother there, anyone. So everyone should be trained. And that's why even in our demands, you have even the perpetrators included, the students included, the staff members included. We are not leaving anyone out, because when you talk about sustainability, it's sustainability, and it has to be all-rounded.
In your movement, have you received any student who has trauma about this experience?
Yeah.
Multiple.
Multiple.
Yeah. One of the effects of sexual harassment is emotional and psychological trauma. And we received testimonials of students saying they had to quit school because they couldn't handle the pressure. You find someone fell into depression and the academics suffered.
And also self-esteem.
Yeah, it's a lot. And actually almost every single case that was reported to us had that aspect of emotional trauma. Yeah, so it is there.
Yeah, it also interferes with someone's career. Like, someone has to change from this school to this school. Others go lose the case, come back, find the same perpetrator, and you just have to move on, live with it. So you see, it brings a lot of damages in people's health and mental health issues.
Okay, according to you, what should be done to the sexual offender?
What should be done?
Or the punishment?
That's a hard one. But I think there should be very specific guidelines on the justice system. First of all, I don't think what is presented in the Constitution at the moment is sufficient. Because if in cases of sexual harassment, the perpetrator just pays 100,000 shillings. That's the Kenyan Constitution. But which lecturer cannot afford 100,000?
So it should be around the country, or should be in the country, or in that
both.
Situation?
It should be in both the institutions and the Constitution. Because, well, let's say sexual harassment cases are not being handled well in your institution, then you have the chance to take it to the Constitution level. And in the first place, institutions are supposed to be safe spaces. They're supposed to be presenting all these policies that make students feel safe. If this is something I go through, then I have a way to go around it, So I don't feel there's enough that's being done at the moment. That's why for me, it should be both institutions and in the Constitution.
Yeah, another thing what I can say is that the Campus Me Too movement is not there to create opponents. We are there to bring allies on board. Unless they don't want to join us and fight this together, then we'll have to use a different measures. Yeah. So we are here to create allies and not maybe opponents. And that's why we are even engaging as many lecturers as we can, those who are willing to work with us, those institutions that are willing to take part with us.
Can students report a case anonymously, like without being recognized, something like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Even most our testimonies are that way. Because as long as you've not consented, we are talking about consent here. We ourselves, our campaign is on consent. You don't really air people's stories if they're not willing to. You have to ask their consent, you have to ask their permission. And those who are willing, also air that. Yeah.
What about if you are in school and you are afraid maybe your lecturer is going to give a straight D or a retake? How do you deal with that? Well, you are in school and you're in that position.
You're afraid because of a case of sexual harassment. Well, first of all, it's in that situation, then you have to determine if your institution has ways to deal with it. Because if the institution has no policy, then there's basically no way to go around it, and that's very unbecoming of the institution, I would say. And that's why we really want policies. The document that we've been talking about that we gave to the Ministry of Education is a policy with these demands. If these demands are put in place, then there's not going to be that phobia of, if I report this, then something is going to happen to me, because it incorporates that. It incorporates a way of reporting that makes you feel safe.
That's why we're even calling the Ministry of Education to really come and implement these policies. We wrote to them the memorandum, gave them petition, and they're just waiting for their responses. Because the minute they give this go-ahead to institution, they'll have to adhere with that. And the minute they don't, they're making a mistake, because at times it's beyond us. It's them. We're pushing them to really incorporate these policies. It's because they're the connections between the institution of higher learning and the students.
Yeah.
What if a lecturer comes on and tell you they have a consent with a student? What could you how would you define consent?
Consent. Well, let's first define what sexual harassment is.
Yeah.
It's unwanted sexual advances of any nature. Is it physical? Is it verbal? Is it non-verbal? Like, just to give examples, she gave an example of winking, hugging, kissing, spanking. Is it something like sending unwanted messages, constantly asking someone on dates and they've made it clear that they don't want to go? Is it telling someone, making very sexual comments towards someone? Like, for example, asking someone how many sexual partners they've had, or are you dating, consistently asking questions that make someone uncomfortable and they don't want them to be asked to them. So if consent is when I have accepted that I want this conversation to continue, or I want this messages to continue, or you asked me on a date and I said yes because I want to go, not because I am being coerced. We have to speak very much about coercion, because when we speak about from staff members to students, then there's a power dynamic. And sometimes we've had cases where students are put in a position where you are not in a position to say no. So if it's coercion, then that's not consent. If you're pushing someone to the corner and they have no option, then that's not consent. Yeah.
Okay, schools. Do schools admit that they have a problem with this case? Or institutions?
Well, that's a tough one. Considering, like we said, there are institutions that do not have a policy. There are also institutions with policies, but they are not being implemented well. There's a particular case of a student who reported, they provided evidence, and the school consented that this is something that has happened. There's evidence, and so we're going to punish this lecturer, and they suspended this lecturer. But then within the same period, they also reinstated the lecturer in the next semester. So by the fact that the school suspended the lecturer, they acknowledge that this is something that has happened, and it's violated the students' rights. But then the fact that they also readmitted this lecturer makes you question the whole thing. So most of the students will not report, most of the victims will not report. And if they report, they're afraid. Is the people who sit in these panels that determine whether this is a case that needs to go forward are mostly lecturers. So you will find that maybe there's a hush-hush on what is going on. That is what I would feel. But some schools have admitted, yes, it's there, and we're going to punish this person.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that everyone protects their own.
Yeah.
If people in these offices of sexual harassment or dealing with those issues with sexual harassment are the same lecturers, and this is a case of a fellow lecturer, do you think it's very easy for this person to really not cover up for their own? People cover up for their own, and that's one of the reasons why we came up with this movement. And one of our demands is getting a gender officer who's not from the institution, because you see, even if there are these policies, even if there are these departments, you'll find that it's the same lecturers who are in that position. And they'll be like talking, yeah, you're one of us. Yeah, we have to get rid of this case. We can't really get down or pin down our own. So at the end of it all, you find that the case just drowns and disappears. And to an extent, even the lecturers end up getting back to the institution, because now you have nothing, you have no power, you have maybe no evidence, you have no one to turn to, you lost a court case. So you just have to live with the trauma, the psychological issue, mental issue, and just hope for the best. And that's why we are trying to break that silence and change that norm. We are changing the narrative, we are changing the norm, so that these victims can always speak out and have a place or a defense mechanism that they can always depend on or rely on.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, let's go for a short commercial break. We'll be right back.
We make up over 3/4 of Africa, the under 35s.
We are the 77%.
They want to shape the continent's future. Be part of it and join African youngsters as they share their stories, their dreams, and their challenges. The 77%, DW's platform for Africa's majority.
님 운명하셨습니다.
좀 넘쳐.
저 이 집 식구예요.
인생 뭐 있습니까? 일식.
느껴져요, 선생님의 심장.
소방님. 새 1일 드라마 기막힌 유산. 내가 정말 죽었단 말이야? 어?
Everywhere, GBS.
Welcome back. Today we are talking about sexual harassment in campuses or higher learning institution. You can also talk to us or be able to send any query through our SMS line is 21144. Okay, I wanted to ask you, are there any cases where a student are harassing the lecturers?
Well, our campaign's focus is on lecturers or staff members harassing students. We've had these cases, we've had such allegations, but there's no evidence that's been provided. There's no lecturer who's come out and said this student is harassing me. And also, we focus mostly on the power dynamic. As a parent, as a lecturer, you spirit the student, you're a parent. So let's say, for example, your kid is a thief. So when you realize that your kid is stealing, do you join them in the stealing or do you guide them out of the stealing? Then if a lecturer is being harassed by a student, do they go with the flow or do they guide the student out of this mess?
They guide them.
Exactly. So if this is the case, then there's no harassment at the end of the day. It's the lecturers, they still hold the power on how to get out of this situation.
So what are the scenario that lecturer uses to leave the sexual harassment?
Okay, one of the scenarios, there are quite a number. I can just get examples from the testimonies we had. Like, times it starts in the lecture hall, whereby maybe a lecturer comes and spots her, like, says, see me after the class, come to my office, bring your assignment and this place. So at times you should always, as much as it's okay, but you should always be cautious on whatever action you take that is provided by that particular perpetrator. Because at times you might think it's on a good note or on a good vibe, but there's an hidden agenda, and that's harassment, because you might be able to enter in a place that you can't get yourself out. So be cautious on such compliments that are given by these lecturers and staff members. Yeah, because you can't be telling me to come. Okay, it's okay to come to an office of a lecturer, but not often. Why often? Unless this lecturer has shown that I'm a mentee or a guidance to you during this your year of study.
And that's actually something else. You'll find that some students, you yourself, you know yourself that you need additional guidance. And so you seek out this lecturer with the aim of getting, educational guidance. But then this lecturer realizes that you need them. So you need to be very cautious on who you go to. Some perpetrators are very nice. you will not suspect them. I've heard of one particular case of a lecturer who is very fatherly, and he's someone who would be at the bottom of your list when you're suspecting about sexual perpetrators. And you will seek out this person, you will seek for their help, but then maybe the lecturer tells you to go to his office past office hours, or to meet outside the office. And you think it's okay because you sought this lecturer out. But then why are you calling me out of office hours when there's no one in the office? Why are you telling me to meet you in a certain restaurant? You know, there's a whole day, you know, call me during those hours, because that's when I'm supposed to come to your office. So other cases are like, for example, when, let's talk about like this period of COVID-19, most students are doing online studies, and you find some institutions are very specific on what devices to use. You need a laptop, or you need a phone with a good network. But if you're from humble background and you're not able to afford this, and your parent is not able to afford this, then the lecturer might know that and use that against you. And they'll tell you, you know what, actually, I can get you a laptop. So I'll just send you this 30,000, you go get the laptop for yourself. You'll be able to attend classes, but on one condition, just one little thing, you know, I'll actually send you fare to meet me in this place, or there's sex like sexting, you know, as long as you keep sexting with me, then I'll provide for you. And as a student who is from a very humble background, you're disadvantaged because you need to graduate, you need to get out of this situation, and the only way out for you is education. So you'll find that, well, it's a small price to pay. That's what you tell yourself because you need it. But it's not a small price. And it's not like the lecturer can't have like other means to help you. So you might not realize that's what's happening, but that is what is happening.
Yeah. And alternatively, we also, during our seminars and our educational forums, we also educate students on, if you have financial issues. I'm a student leader, and I educate my constituents, like, if you have a problem, maybe it's financially, emotionally, where do you approach, so that we can avoid this thing that brings about desperation to an extent that you have to really be a part of something that you didn't really call for it. So maybe through the seminar, the education forum, we give them avenues. And apart from that, we also encourage them that to always come out. And that's why we have maybe student body to represent such issues.
Do you think peer pressure can lead to sexual harassment?
Yes. We've had cases like of a student who maybe, for example, student is already involved with the lecturer with or without their consent. And so they pressure their own fellow students to be involved with other lecturers. It's not something that was in your mind. It's not something that you were intending to do, but you find like there's bad company everywhere. And so your fellow student might set you up, you know, come out with me. I'm going out on a date in this place. And so you go with them. They're like, don't even bring fare. You know, I'll cater for everything. And you get there and you find that it's a setup with maybe a lecturer who was interested in you, you know, and they've set you up to get there. Some cases, especially guys who have had, males, who are sexually harassed by lecturers who wants their female friends phone numbers. You get? So you're told, if you don't get this number for me, then, you know, this is going to happen to you, and it's a threat. And so this student might determine, I might just as well set her up than I myself get punished, you know. So that has happened.
Yeah, and we can, at times, even when I talk to maybe students, I tell them, we use the concept of nature and nurture. I might be naturally this way, but I can be nurtured to be someone better. That's where Campus Me Too is there to nurture people. And that's why I love to use the 4 J's. In Kiswahili means jijue, jielimishe, jiajiri, jiamrishe. Know yourself, know where you come from, know that this person is from this background, I'm from this background, and I can't be carried away. We can't be the same, all of us. We are all from different backgrounds, from different social status. And the minute you know that, and the minute we do this training, especially to newly enrolled students, they really grow with that mindset, knowing that as much as this student is doing this on my colleague, I don't have to really go with her. You create platforms where they can grow themselves through knowing themselves.
Okay. What are the demand for the Campus Me Too movement?
Okay, we have the 5 demands. The first demand is educate newly enrolled students about the educational, maybe training seminars on issues of sexual harassment, forms of sexual harassment and all those. And our second demand is on maybe training on the lecturers, training them about sexual harassment, and upon that, at the end of it all, they may be required to sign the code of conduct. The third one is appointing a gender officer who's not from the institution to handle issues with sexual harassment. The fourth one is educating.
Coming up,
Yeah.
sorry.
It's
I'll
okay.
just help you with that. The fourth one is coming up with a committee that deals with, that handles cases of missing marks because of instances of sexual harassment. And then the fifth one is to implement all the demands, the first, the second, the third, and the fourth, into a policy, sexual harassment policy that is standard to all institutions.
Okay. How do you report a victim? How do you handle or guide a victim who has reported to you about the experience?
Yeah, in some institution, I can say they're privileged to have application. Like I've heard of RADA, I've had one in Kenyatta University, and they're still coming because through the campaign, we've even motivated more apps to come. And apart from that, as Campus Me Too, we have a website and our media handles at Campus Me Too ambassadors. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's where we can handle such cases. And at times we can, maybe when you're doing our rallies or our movements, we advocate and also encourage people to really speak out. Some want their identity to be heard. And we go to an extent, those who are willing to really share, they are maybe do a documentary. And this documentary goes viral. And as it goes viral, it's like, me too, me too. That's why the Campus Me Too came around, because it's not one person, it's not 2 people, there are many people. That's why you have me too, I've been a victim, me too, I've been a victim. And we are focusing on campuses. So that's where we came up with the Campus Me Too, because it shows inclusivity, it's not a one person thing. There are very many victims. And once there's inclusivity, that's where we really mobilize and organize a big number to really come on board and speak out to those handles. Yeah.
And also to add on what you said, there's the organizations, like you can get psychological help. That's one thing that we focus on, because unless you're in a space where you're feeling safe, then there's really nothing you can do to move forward. So as the movement, we also provide like psychological help to victims.
Okay. Okay, so you have talked about Campus Me Too movement demand. Kindly, can you expand on it?
Okay. I'll start with the first one.
Okay, yeah.
So we've been talking about creating awareness on sexual harassment, and we realized that most students are unaware of what sexual harassment is. So the first demand is about facilitating them to be educated on what sexual harassment includes. And when you have information, then you know how to move forward. There are policies in your institution. That's what this demand is about. The second one is about like training the lecturers themselves. We've talked about some people acting out of ignorance. So we don't want to assume that they know what they're doing. So we want them to be included in this. And also when lecturers who are allies to this campaign are educated on what sexual harassment is, then they also know how to deal with cases of sexual harassment presented to them. So at the end of the day, they sign a code of conduct and ethics, and so it's a guideline to them, and there's no claim of I didn't know what I was doing. And the third demand is about appointing a gender officer. So like we've said before, most of these cases, even in the current situation, if a university has a policy, then you find that the panel consists of lecturers. And these lecturers, some of them might be perpetrators. So you find there's bias when dealing with these cases. You find that there's victimization in the panels. You find like sometimes there's that stigma, there's that phobia of if I report and then the same lecturer who harassed me is the one I'll find in the panel, then this victim cannot actually come forward. So the essence of having a gender officer who is not part of the institution is to remove this bias and this phobia of students reporting cases of sexual harassment. I think.
Yeah, to add on that, you can see even it brings about judgmental. Like if I report, this is a lecturer who sees you, who teaches you, you see like he might or she might judge you. Yeah, because of how you dress, how she sees you or he sees you in class.
Yeah.
So you don't even have the assurity that, am I going to be helped or will they judge me the minute I enter the office? But by getting an agenda officer who's not from the institution, will encourage something like formality, whereby this person will do the analysis based on what is given on the table. Yeah, without being judgmental.
Okay, and also the fourth demand is about coming up with a committee that deals with cases of missing marks due to sexual harassment. So you find like that's it's an issue that's very highlighted when it comes to sexual harassment from lecturers to students. And so if you're being harassed by your lecturer, like for example, they don't give you marks and they tell you have to, consent to sexual relations with them so that they can give you your marks, and you have to keep going to this lecturer. Okay, for example, I'll give a case study. There's a student who has not received her marks for 2 years because they did not consent to having sexual relations with their lecturer, and they've not graduated up until now. Everyone graduated except them, or according to them. So you find that if she keeps going on to this lecturer and the demand is the same, consent and I'll give you your marks. So by forming a committee that deals with such cases of missing marks due to sexual harassment, then we keep the victim safe from the perpetrator, and then they also get their marks. You don't have to keep on dealing with the same person. We want to remove that direct face-to-face conversation or direct contact with the lecturer who is the perpetrator.
Yeah, and I'll also give an example. Look at primary schools and secondary school. If you realize this is a teacher who harasses you, you'll avoid that teacher or that particular mentor or tutor. And at the end of it all, you'll do your KCP or KCSE exam, and he or she won't be a determinant of what you're going to get at the end of it. Yeah. But look at institution of higher learning. They're the determinants. And by creating this committee, that means they won't be a determinant of what you're going to do. So that's why you can't even avoid them. You have to face them, and you either give in or you're going to face it rough, because we are not going to graduate, you're going to get missing mark, you're going to get frustrated, your name will be tarnished. Some even go to an extent of maybe threatening you, which is not really good. So you see, like a good example is primary and high school. If the Minister of Education could implement these policies also in institution of higher learning, we'll be really avoiding such issues of sexual harassment.
What if you change the course?
Now, if you change your course, I was supposed to do medicine. That's my career. Why should an individual make me change because of his wants or satisfying his needs?
Just to add on what she's saying, what's the guarantee that this course that I'm going to has no perpetrators?
Exactly.
Or even if you change institutions, what's the guarantee that this new institution has no perpetrators? There's no guarantee. So you will change your course, maybe you'll be well for 1 or 2 years, then you go and get someone else.
So if the Minister of Education could really do something about these policies, like I've just given an example of primary and high school, we could really avoid this issue that we have to face our perpetrators. Because you see, even I'm in high school or I'm in primary, I can avoid this teacher, and at the end of it all, I'll just work and I used to get my grades without him or her determining what I'm going to score. So if this could be the situation, maybe institution of higher learning, we couldn't be here even talking about sexual harassment, because we just avoid that lecturer, work hard, achieve your goals, achieve your career, and graduate school. But if these are the same people you're supposed to go, it's like you're nagging them or you're giving in to their needs, you will still have to face all those. So either way, there is usually a consequences.
And just to finish the demands, we've expanded the first to fourth demand. So the fifth demand is to all those demands to be implemented in a sexual act policy for every institution. Because if these demands are in place and they are in the law, this is how these things are supposed to go in this institution, then we're going to get rid of cases of sexual harassment. And also that it also means we need to review it over time, maybe annually. Is it working? Is there something that we need to change, an approach that we need to change? So that's the 5 demands.
And another thing is that someone might ask, what's next? The newly enrolled students have been taught, lecturers have been taught, committee is there, the gender office is there. What next? That's why we have the demand number 5, because we have to now implement, make the policies be active and into action. Then we don't want to go back to again to paper policies, whereby we just say things and everything doesn't have an end. That's why we're talking about sustainability.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you be able to give us your social media and also give us your parting shot? We'll start from here or here.
Well, I'll start. So I always like to start my parting shot with a message to the victims. You're the victim. You're not the perpetrator. It's not your fault. It's not what you're wearing. It's not what time you went to the office. It's nothing that you did that made you be sexually harassed. It's all in the perpetrator's mind. So don't feel like it's something too little that you shouldn't be able to be affected by it. You were affected by it. It happened to you, and don't minimalize it no matter what anyone says to you. And also to the perpetrators, I hope this message, makes you change your way. We're not looking for opponents. We're just looking for allies. We want this to be a safe environment. We want our schools to be a safe environment. And we want to have good relations with you. We want to be thankful to you for how far we've come. So if you're a perpetrator out there, I hope you change your way. And to the Ministry of Education, this is your responsibility. We have given you a policy. We have done what we could, but you're still silent on this issue. So what happened to our policy? What happened to a memorandum? What are you doing about this? It is happening. It is under you. So we're calling you out as the ministry. Do something. And also to everyone who would want to know more about the Campus Me Too campaign, all our social media pages are at Campus Me Too, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And also we have a website at campusmetoo.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, what I can just say that education has no longer become a safe space for learning, and that's why I'm encouraging all of you. Let's stand together. Let's fight sexual harassment in institution of higher learning, because I believe together we can achieve a lot. Let's come together and fight these injustices and break the silence for the victims. And apart from that, we are there to create allies and not opponents. And what I can just say, Campus Me Too is polarizing to organize, and you are organizing to win. So the Minister of Government or the Minister of Education, we are coming for you, and we really need you to implement these policies so that institution of higher learning can become a safe space for learning.
Okay, thank you so much. Viewer, I hope that there's something that you have learned today about today's topic, about sexual harassment in campuses. You can keep the conversation going. See you next time. I've been your host, Brenda Ogweno.